Welcome to the EPG Pathshala program. Myself Meenal Katarnikar, Associate Professor from the Department of Philosophy, University of Mumbai. In this session, we are discussing the logical structure of the Jaina doctrine of Syadvad. This session would be dealing with the parent theory of Anekantavad, the developed theory of Syadvad, the structure of the sevenfold predication, that is Saptabhangi, and the challenge that it has posed for the traditional logical systems. Being the students of philosophy, all of us are aware of the basic principles of traditional logic. As we know, the first principle of the traditional logic is the principle of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be at the same time be and not be. Second principle is the principle of excluded middle. A thing must be either existent or non-existent. There is no third. And lastly, the principle of identity. Everything is what it is. The whole structure of traditional logic and then the further structure of symbolic logic is based on these three basic principles. Let us see whether Syadvad creates the alternative system of logic with the help of multidimensional logic or multi-valued logic through the structure of Saptabhangi. But for the knowledge of Syadvad, we should know something about Anekantavad and something about Jaina theory of metaphysics, because Syadvad is a logical extension of Anekantavad, which is the Jaina theory of non-dogmatism, and Syadvad is not the Jaina theory of inference or the part of Jaina theory of pramanas. As the logical extension of Anekantavad, Syadvad assumes a metaphysical context of Anekantavad. So it can be said that the theory of Syad is the offshoot of Jaina metaphysical position presented in the logical format. What is Anekantavad? Generally, Jaina philosophy is described into this one word, Anekantavad. It is a doctrine of non-absolutism, as the name itself suggests, or the doctrine of non-dogmatism. Jainas are holding non-violence as the prime principle as a religious system, but as a philosophical system, the doctrine of non-violence is extended to the rational level, and that is how there is this theory of Anekantavad. It assumes that every statement about the reality is a partial truth and acquires a content of truth, and therefore there is no occasion or there is no need to reject any assertion about the reality. Being a Jaina theory, it assumes a theory of manifoldness of reality and truth. In other words, according to it, the reality is having multiple dimensions, and therefore grasping some few dimensions of reality leads to the conditional assertion of reality. This can be also described as the doctrine of relative pluralism and the doctrine of non-dogmatic assertion. Syadvad is based on these metaphysical contents of Anekantavad. Let us go to some more details of Syadvad. It is described as the Jaina dialectic. Being a dialectic, it acquires the spirit of reconciliation. It tries to reconcile the two extreme viewpoints in philosophy, the theory of permanence and the theory of change. According to it, reality is both permanent as well as changing. And to designate this kind of conditionality of the nature of reality, it adds the particle syad before any assertion about the reality. According to it, the acceptance of a view that a single entity is variegated by a plurality of attributes, namely eternal and non-eternal or permanent and changing, is quite natural, and therefore any assertion about these single attributes should be a conditional assertion and not the absolute assertion. Syadvad represents the doctrine of conditional assertion, and the Saptabhangi represents the sevenfold structure of those conditional assertions. Syadvad is a theory having the canonical background. Let us see the canonical formulation of Syadvad. This is a quotation from the canons. An entity is somehow possessed of the character being, somehow possessed of the character non-being, somehow possessed of both being and non-being, while it is somehow indescribable. All these four features characterizing an entity are in accordance with the speaker's intention, or alternatively in accordance with the conditions of assertion and not in absolute manner. In short, non-absolutism in the conditions of assertion is the essence of Syadvad. An entity is possessed of the characters being as well as non-being insofar as these are possessed to be asserted successively, while it is indescribable insofar as they are possessed to be asserted simultaneously. Now we can see that simultaneous assertion of the characters being and non-being is a logical impossibility, and therefore at this juncture the entity is described as indescribable. That is how there are three main variables, or there are three main truth values in Syadvad. It is being, non-being and indescribability. On the basis of first four assertions, there are three more forms of assertions, each made possible by its specific circumstances. The three more forms of assertions arise when an entity is held out to be possessed of the character being, as also to be indescribable, when it is held out to be possessed of the character non-being, as also to be indescribable, and lastly when it is held out to be possessed of the characters being as well as non-being, as also to be indescribable. So we have arrived at the sevenfold judgment, that is Saptabhangi. Let us read them one by one. Syad asti, somehow a thing exists. Syad nasti, somehow a thing does not exist. Syad asti cha nasti, somehow a thing exists and does not exist. Syad avaktavyam, somehow a thing is indescribable. Syad asti cha avaktavyam, somehow a thing exists and is indescribable. Syad nasti cha avaktavyam, somehow a thing does not exist and is indescribable. Syad asti cha nasti cha avaktavyam, somehow a thing exists, does not exist and is indescribable. According to Jainas, the assertions for every entity are 7, not less and not more, because there are three main truth values and the permutations and the combinations of the three truth values lead to the number 7, and therefore there are 7 predications for everything. That is how it is Saptabhangi. As can be seen from the formulation of Syadvad, it does not deny the possibility of predication. That is, it does not hold that nothing can be described, but it disallows any absolute or categorical predication. According to Syadvad, every predication is true, but only in the context of certain conditions like root substance, space, time and manifesting form. Syad highlights, the term Syad highlights that context, and Syadvad represents 7 contextual predications. Each contextual predication is called a bhanga. So it is a saptabhangi. Let us see what are the features of Syadvad and saptabhangi in the context of logic and metaphysics. We can see that the ascription of being and not being is not done in the same manner in the saptabhangi. The bhanga related to asti designates the existential feature because we can assert the existence of anything in the very ordinary sense. But the bhanga related to nasti, second bhanga, where it is said syad nasti, it does not represent the existential designation. Rather, it designates the conceptual context of Syadvad. That is to say, when we are perceiving a thing also, we can very meaningfully say that the thing does not exist. And here, the designation Syad Nasti would refer to the other context in which it would be meaningful to say thing does not exist. For the more elaboration of this, one can safely refer to the write-up related to Syadvad. So, the conceptual context of Syad Asti and Syad Nasti are not one and the same. The conceptual context of Syad Nasti is based on, or it is derived from, the 4 types of abhava that are articulated by the Jaina logicians and which are mentioned by Samantabhadra in his text called Aptamimamsa. The 7-fold predication of reality is a corollary of the Jaina metaphysical position, according to which the things are multidimensional. Everything in the universe is having infinite modes, and therefore it is humanly impossible to grasp all the modes at a time. At one time, one can grasp only few modes, and every time the grasping of the modes can vary. And therefore, our assertions also can vary, and they can be summarized into the 7 conditional predications as we have seen before. Now here the question arises, does Syadvad challenge the basic laws of thought that we discussed at the beginning of this session? Does Syadvad pose a challenge for the traditional logic? Let us see the Bhanga 3, where it is said, Syad asti cha nasti. The thing somehow exists and it does not exist. Doesn't it violate the principle of non-contradiction, according to which a thing cannot at the same time be and not be? Yes, apparently it violates the law of non-contradiction. Let us see other principle where it is said, a thing must be either existent or non-existent. There is no third. This is the principle of excluded middle. And let us read now Bhanga 4, where it is said, Syad avaktavyam. A thing is somehow indescribable or inexpressible. Doesn't it violate the rule of excluded middle, where the third possibility of indescribability is asserted? So this is apparent violation of the law of excluded middle. So there is a possibility to say that with the help of 3 truth values, Syadvad is trying to pose a new logical system in the field of traditional logic or symbolic logic. Many modern thinkers have tried to formulate Syadvad as a logical system. For example, B.K. Matilal and Sangamlal Pandey have tried to formulate Syadvad as a form of deviant logic or many-valued logic. But B.K. Matilal and Sagar Maljain have tried to formulate Syadvad as the logic of conditional statements. Professor Pradeep Gokhale has tried to formulate Syadvad as the existential logical system. He tries to interpret Syad as an existential quantifier. Let us see the formulation of Syadvad as the logic of conditionals, which is given by B.K. Matilal and Sagarmal Jain. Condition 1, S is P. Condition 2, S is not P. Condition 3, S is P and S is not P. Condition 4, S is inexpressible. Condition 5, S is P and S is inexpressible. Condition 6, S is not P and S is inexpressible. And seventh condition, S is P, S is not P and S is inexpressible. Now these 7 conditions can show us that the context of the condition is different, and therefore in the context of that particular condition, all these 7 statements are partially correct and conditionally asserted. So this is the logic of conditionals. We have another formulation of Syadvad where it is formulated as with the help of existential quantifier. In some cases of S exists. In some cases S does not exist. In some cases S exists and in some cases S does not exist. In some cases X is indescribable. In some cases X exists and in some cases X is indescribable. In some cases X does not exist and in some cases S is indescribable. In some cases S exists, in some other cases S does not exist and in some other cases S is indescribable. So in existential, with the help of existential quantifier, we can interpret the 7 bhangas as the existential statements, where it becomes more obvious that the assertions, conditions of assertions vary, and with the variation in the conditions of assertion, the truth value remains partial. So this is the formulation of Syadvad with the help of existential quantifier. It also highlights the fact that no assertion can be made with the help of universal quantifier. So all the cases of assertion are existential quantifiers, and therefore they have the truth value which has limited sense, or rather in a very conditional sense. Now it is very obvious that this kind of relativistic logical system is open to challenges and criticisms in both the traditional and modern context. Let us see the objections one by one. There is one very interesting objection against Syadvad, that if Syadvad is accepted, a liberated person will not be really liberated. We will have to say that a person is liberated in one context and the person is not liberated in another context, and the person's liberation cannot be described from the third context. So there would not be the assertive statement about the liberation of the person. Secondly, logicians argue that if the statement, namely every assertion is conditional, is taken to be an unconditional assertion, then it involves a self-contradiction. This is a rhetoric type of argument, and it is faced by all the normative formulas like principle of verification or Nagarjuna's Chatushkoti, etc. The logicians point out that Syadvad commits a fallacy of conjoining two opposites, namely Asti and Nasti, into one assertion, and this is the open contradiction. There is one objection by the Mimamsa system that the number of conditional predications can go up to 100 or 1000. Why only limited to 7? Now these objections can be easily answered by Syadvad because they are not targeting the essential principle of Syadvad, that every assertion must be regarded as the conditional assertion. There cannot be the challenge to this metaphysical position because metaphysical positions are in a way prescriptive positions, and therefore the logical system that is developed by Syadvad is well structured on the background of Jaina metaphysical position. And in this sense, Syadvad has made a very important contribution to the field of logic. It has opened up the possibility to formulate the logical system which is based on the three values or more than the two ordinarily accepted values, and to judge the way in which we can compare, contrast or synthesize the assertions about the reality. The scholars in the field and the students in the field should really go for the comparison of Syadvad and also assimilation of Syadvad in the available logical systems. This is really the original contribution of Syadvad made to the field of logic. For more details of Syadvad, one must read the original sources which formulate the Syadvad and Saptabhangi. So please refer to the write-up on Syadvad and also refer to the reference list that is mentioned at the end of the session. Thank you very much.